Today we have with us here in AIG, James Chang, the portfolio manager of Allianz Global Artificial Intelligence. First of all, Jim, thank you very much for your visit here to AIG.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
My first question could be, the development of artificial intelligence has been like compared even to the discovery of electricity. So what can we expect from the emergence of AI, and where is the limit?
Yeah, that's a great question. With respect to artificial intelligence as a technology, let's kind of rewind and think back in history in terms of what other forms of technology has transformed the globe in terms of its capability. And what we discovered is that every single large platform technology, such as electricity, as you mentioned, steam power, and so forth, has the limits in terms of what it ultimately will impact globally from a GDP output perspective. It's always been larger in scope. And how people discover ways to use that technology for other types of application is also much larger over time. And with respect to AI, it's clearly one of those technology that is going to be very transformative and impact every single industry globally. And so while there's a lot of focus today around technology, which is a very important part of it, ultimately the areas outside of technology, from industries such as financial services, agriculture, manufacturing, automotive, and so forth, all these industries will see very profound impact, how they're utilizing AI to transform their business model. And a lot of estimates have been out there with respect to how big this opportunity can be. And they've estimated that over the next 10 to 15 years, it could enhance global GDP almost $16 trillion in incremental output. And that's probably one of the most interesting aspects, is that this is, while this technology is very important for the technology ecosystem, but the benefactor and how all the different industries will utilize this is really the profound change in terms of expanding the global economy over time.
Okay, so now we have like a new environment of higher rates. How can this environment affect companies developing AI technology? Can we continue seeing valuation readjustments, or can we expect some companies to see them struggling to refinance?
Yeah, that's a great question, and this is an environment that we're all still living in terms of inflation. Inflation is still here, and all the central banks around the world are still trying to fight inflation. And so that fight is not over yet. It's still ahead of us. But nevertheless, inflation clearly, when compared to 2022, it's on its way path of declining. So we're in a healing mode with respect to high inflation. And so we need more time in terms of how that could come in. And what that means is, obviously, the central banks will remain restrictive for an extended period of time before they adjust rates to be more normal. But in that backdrop, companies themselves have already been figuring out how to continue to invest around artificial intelligence, as we saw last year, and for sure this year. And while companies globally, in terms of managing their business, they have to deal with a moderating economy, meaning slowing revenues and slowing earnings, they find ways to invest in artificial intelligence. And why is that important? Artificial intelligence, as we talked about, it's going to impact every industry around the globe. And they need to have these investments to secure their long-term future. And that long-term future means a lot more for a company's long-term success than, say, 12 months of earnings. And so companies have been finding ways to move around their capital budgets or spending budgets to accommodate and to finance these projects to enable artificial intelligence within them. And so, in this earnings season, probably one of the most pervasive comments coming out of the banking sector, right? The banking sector is a lot of concerns about what's happening with interest rate impacting them. The banking sector has to deal with certain banks' failure, etc. But yet, large banks have been very vocal about their level of investment in AI. So that's another example of how companies have been able to adapt in the changing environment, but they know that they need to invest in artificial intelligence. So we don't think artificial intelligence investment of which will diminish in this environment, even because this is really for the long term for a given company. In terms of the last question you asked about the refinancing, most companies that are making investments today are very large, big enterprises companies. So initially it's been the big Google, Facebook, hyperscale, cloud service providers, but more the large enterprise companies like the large financial banks or consumer products companies or even healthcare companies are making investments. So they have the financial means and they don't need external financing to make this happen.
Okay, so my next question, I would like you to ask please some examples of application and developments that have surprised you most recently and where you see the most potential.
Yeah, so we've been investing in this area for over 6 years. And probably what's been most surprising in 2023 is really the broad adoption of meaning that more and more companies are talking about it. And these companies are not in technology. Yes, technology, a lot of companies make comments about their AI investment. It's really more the companies outside of AI. Specifically, you have large companies like financial institutions like JP Morgan, where the CEO is very vocal about how they have been able to derive capabilities from AI, where they think that how it will impact their financial model already and how they think it will be even more impactful in the coming years. In healthcare, drug companies like AstraZeneca, they talked about in their earnings recently how many R&D people they have in developing artificial intelligence in the entire drug discovery. They mentioned they have over 400 data scientists inside the company, in researching ways of how they can utilize AI to expedite the process of drug discovery. So these big, formal comments by large companies, probably one of the most surprising things, because we always thought that they would keep it very quiet to themselves, because this is a competitive advantage for them, right? And you don't want to be very loud about what you're investing in, but the fact that they are, meaning that the progress that they're making is much more profound than what they've already been telling us. That's probably one of the most biggest surprise. But the other aspect is this ChatGPT technology. While companies around the world are still trying to figure out what to do with it in terms of commercializing it, the number of mentions by companies, the number of users that's already experimenting with it in terms of how they can utilize it in their day-to-day job is very profound and very significant. And we do think that you're sitting here in a very large investment cycle that's ahead of us over the next several years. I mean, effectively, ChatGPT became much more mainstream in late last year. So it's really only been 6 months when this has become much more talked about. So it is relatively new.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So you have give us a flavor that your fund is not a purely technological fund. So what is the weight of these sectors that you have mentioned, financials, healthcare in the portfolio? How has this evolved in the last months?
Yeah, we've always said that over time, areas outside of technology, in terms of our investment process, will grow. When we started this 6 years ago, to find investable ideas that's outside of technology was very small, less than 20%. And today it's in the low 30% range. And we do think that will continue to grow over time. But today, our allocation in areas of technology, the two categories we talked about, AI infrastructure and AI applications, is higher when compared to, say, 12 months ago. And the reason it's higher is because we're at the very early stage of this really large investment cycle around ChatGPT. And so there's going to be a lot of capital spending dollars going into this area. And so all the technology companies that will benefit from which will see an acceleration in terms of demand and also acceleration in terms of their growth rates. And so we have a little bit more bias towards the tech companies at this moment in time during this investment cycle. And over time, as the technology becomes a bit more mature, more companies can figure out how to utilize it, and we will have a lot more exposure in the likes of financial services, healthcare, consumer, and so forth. So it's one that you kind of have to adjust to where the investment cycle is to kind of modulate your exposure.
Okay, so Jim, thank you very much for your time, and thank you for being here with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you.